really important to consider here. I just wanted to mention a little bit about technology, if I could. The situation with the technology is, if we go down the heat pump route, we have to keep that in the leisure centre for at least those 15 years to get any kind of payback on it whatsoever, and it's a completely different system. With the gas system, it's proposed to build it in a modular way. So I'm no technician on this, but I'm sure what that means is, if, for example, the heating system today for buildings, large buildings, is a hydrogen system, that gas system we've got can be used as a hydrogen. It can be converted quite easily without what we've got in the infrastructure. We can't do that with the electric system. So that's a really important thing, because who knows, 5, 7, 10 years time, hydrogen or some other source may be the thing we can use out in the leisure centre instead. The fact that we haven't put lots up front, i.e. the 90,000 for the gas system, means it's easier to replace for a more modern system in 5, 7, 8 years time. So that kind of gets us looking into the future. Just finally, I just wanted to put on, we've talked about the finances, but I wanted to also talk about the actual CO2 savings of the two different systems. Okay. The difference, the same, the system is about 72 tons of CO2 per annum, which sounds like a lot, but when I looked into it, it's not actually a lot. A one-way flight to New York is 200 tons of CO2, for example. Yeah, that's the whole plane. So just to put that into perspective, it's we have to weigh up what that saves. So I think in general, Chair, whilst I really have empathy with Councillor Ray's motion, I generally do. We've had conversations about it. I really do. I do urge members to take into account the financial facts and the actual savings and where we might be in 5, 7, 8 years time with heating technology. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So anybody else? Councillor Norman, then Councillor Smith, then Councillor Trent, if that's Councillor. Right. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, Councillor Ray named me quite early on with regard to the climate change emergency, and he did also quote, and he's been quoted by Councillor Smith as well, to take this into account as a factor in all future policy. What it did not say is that we must follow this as a factor in all sort of such debates and expenditure. There is that problem of that rather large bill, and Andy Smith's dramatic revelation of 72 tonnes only of CO2 per annum, which I'm sure he's checked, because it does sound amazingly small. And it's always obviously easy. I mean, if you're really going to say this has got to be 100% everything, why are you building a leisure centre in the first place? Why are you building paddle tennis courts? I don't see how that can be environmentally friendly. But what I hope that Councillor Ray or Councillor Trent, when the reply is, why is there a 3G pitch? Sue Woodward, Councillor Woodward actually mentioned about the environmental questions about 3G pitches. And 5G pitches are 2 even, but 3G pitches. Why are you building a 3G pitch? Why have you not criticised that? If you're going to be 100% pure on the environment and all those activities, you've got to say something about that. I don't understand it. So it's easy to say, yeah, it's environmentally friendly, we'll vote for that, and that's it. But I'm not prepared to do that. There is a big cost involved, and money spent here cannot be spent there. So I don't feel guilty or bad about not supporting this particular motion. Much as I understand all the arguments put forward, and as a vegetarian since 1964, I think I can speak better than most about saving the planet.
I think Councillor John Smith wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Echoing Councillor Norman's comment about the climate change emergency, it appears we only have an emergency when it suits us. We're building a 3G pitch, which has got absolutely nothing to recommend it for emergency on the climate. We're putting a paddle tennis court on a green area with an open top, which will get all sorts of leaves in it, which probably means it can't be played on for half the year. And not too long ago, we donated £1.7 million to a private company. So if we hadn't done that, we'd have had plenty of money to have paid for are the
No,
botanists,
the botanist. Yeah. No.
which if you remember, we did.
Yeah, come on. Right,
Lost my
well,
train of thought now, but
can we just
as far
let
as I
him
can
finish
see,
what
well,
he
if I
wants
add
to
all
say?
the figures up, at the end of the 15 years, there's not a great deal of difference between what we pay out and what we get back, because with all the savings on the cost of running it, I must admit, I got lost with some of the figures that have been put forward on it, because it seemed to change from 545 to 693 and then back to another one. So I may be wrong on that, but it seems to me that over 15 years we've come fairly close to being on a balance.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Long, did you?
Thank you, Chair. So from this motion, Councillor Ray is looking to increase the new leisure centre costing, which means delay and completely disregarding the outcomes of the leisure task group meetings. But I just want to clarify a few points which you made earlier. So after the meeting in August, we had a briefing paper which the task group members, which comprises members from around the chamber, which we agreed to. There was only a comment, an email from yourself, which with the breakdown of electric costings, which I replied to you, but there was no request of meetings or any further information afterwards as well. In regards to taking the task group notes, it was in December, then October. It was due to ongoing negotiations, but I just want to clarify with that. And it was commercial sensitive notes, so that the agreement with ONS chair was to be taken to December meeting. However, back to the point, which is our task group, the new leisure centre task group, comprises members from all parts of the chamber, and we emphasise the importance of being environmentally responsible, but remaining in budget and saving costs where possible, and that was emphasised in our task group meetings. So members raised on value engineering process, and our task group were delighted to see significant savings of approximately £300,000, which would directly benefit our residents. And I would like to thank officers for the hard work into months of finding where we could save, because we know this is a massive budget into the leisure centre. I would like to clarify, the leisure centre task group did not have reservations about the heating system. We were open to look into the electric option, should it fit in the budget. And that also is stated in document as well. And also being cost effective in the long run. However, the electric system was found to be much higher cost, not just in installation, but maintenance and replacement as well. So, example from the briefing paper, a £34,000 for the hybrid mix versus staggering electric, which is 547,000. This is based on the briefing paper that we had in September, and that's just for the installation, and that's present day value. So if we're looking to replace 20, 25 years down the line, we can imagine how much this system would be if it was to replace for the electric or the hybrid system. So I cannot agree with this motion. It disregards to our task group meetings, to have savings, to be within the budget. We have to be within the budget because we emphasize that to deliver within the budget, which we all agree to. We're not saving, you're asking us to remove the £300,000, which we did ask to save and we agreed for. And I am not for to add over £500,000 just for the installation of electric system only, where the money, again, as Councillor Smith said, we could be saved in better places for the residents.
Thank you. Now I've got Councillor Strachan, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Trent. Is anybody else desperate? Okay. So Councillor Strachan then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say at the outset of these remarks that I do genuinely choose to believe that Councillor Ray's motion is coming from a position of an honest desire to improve the council's environmental impact. It will perhaps not surprise him that I'm unable to support it. And that's on three grounds, Chair. Those are practicality, those of financial sustainability, and of governance. Turning to practicality first, and I'll be brief on this. Not knowing a great deal about the various different ways of heating large buildings, I went on an internet deep dive and happened to find a few identified early adopter pitfalls for large buildings powered by air source heat pumps. The first is that they lack efficiency when they're powering the size of that building. The second, that when they have to be large to power a large building, they're often quite noisy. And I'd submit, Chair, that that's perhaps not the most appropriate thing to create large amounts of noise when one has a residential area close by. They are difficult to retrofit and difficult to maintain, particularly when one changes fuel sources, as Councillor Smith has already alluded to. And most interestingly, I found a suggestion that they can be used to mask the true carbon impact of powering these, particularly where the local grid is not necessarily powered largely by renewables. Now, helpfully, Chair, the National Grid make the stats available on power generation nationally. And at the point at which I looked, when I should have been listening to Councillor Ray, the UK national demand was 42.17 gigawatts, of which 3.5 was generated by nuclear, a little over 6 by wind, but it's been a windy day, 0.75 by hydroelectric, nil by solar, but it's dark and it's December, and fortunately none from coal. But 22.56 gigawatts was generated by gas combined cycle power stations. And so a little over 50% of the power generated in the United Kingdom half an hour ago was generated exactly from this point. And so I'd submit that this is a little bit of a red herring if we're going to say that powering it that way is going to mask our carbon emissions. But Chair, it will perhaps not surprise you that the main thrust of my argument is on finance. And if I can guide members to the financial implications section that's appended to this report, it's not perhaps as simple as merely increasing the budget. Can I remind members at this stage of the guiding principles of this Council's medium-term financial strategy, which are that we shall be prudent and that watchword shall guide everything. The impact of this motion is to remove all project headroom and contingency from the project as costed, and then to place additional borrowing pressure of £338,000 funded by internal borrowing. And I'm just going to remind members what internal borrowing is. That is not doing something now so that you can borrow the money from it to do something else. It is quite literally robbing Peter to pay Paul, and we've been doing it very successfully for a large number of years. We've been very lucky with a series of relatively fortunate financial settlements. We do not expect to be so lucky this year. This might just be the time that we rob Peter to pay Paul, but Peter needs his money back, or there isn't any. And so that is a fundamental problem, because we're reaching into a very deep pocket and we're not quite finding its bottom. I also have said in the most recent round of medium-term financial strategy meetings, and I believe in this chamber, that we are now moving from a point where we're saving funds to where we're delivering, we're drawing down. There is not a lot to go around. And so Anthony's financial assessment says the only possible funding source for that internal borrowing at the moment is the £250,000 a year corporate inflation budget. On a point of our recent calculations for the emergent MTFS, the inflationary impact on the forthcoming 4 years, based upon utilities, construction inflation, licenses, national living wage increases, and employers' national insurance increased contributions, is £1.8 million over 4 years, of which that entire reserve funds just 1 million. So this sweeps that away, deprives us of our protection against the external world, but also deprives this project of its inflation protection. While I concede that fully electric does bring lower energy costs, the true payback in this comes when we include maintenance and replacement costs. And this is what's contained in that table on the first page of the financial implications section. You have an additional upfront cost of £545,310. The replacement at a, quite frankly, lowballed inflationary cost of £700,000, and a sinking fund to fund that replacement of £46,667 a year. That makes the payback period 20 years, or 5 years after we've spent £700,000 replacing this project. Frankly, Chairman, for me, that is financially absurd. Can I turn though finally to governance? Because Council has been proceeding reasonably well on this with the assistance and we understood the support of the Leisure Task Group. And the minutes that Councillor Leung has already referred to implied broad support for this changed route via the value engineering system. The task group appeared to accept that the cost implications of that originally envisaged scheme were simply too severe. Chair, for a member of a task group to break ranks and seek to change policy by a motion like this is bizarre. It runs a coach and horses through the task group structure. It contains such wide-ranging changes to the project budget that I'm frankly astonished I wasn't notified of it before the motion landed at council. And it begs the question as to whether the task group is really operating as the critical friend that I urged it to be when we agreed the budget on this in May this year. And so while the motion may come from the right place, or at least I hope it comes from the right place, this is a wrecking ball motion if it's accepted tonight. It adds so much additional expense to the project to make it unmanageable, while stripping this council of its protections against that increasingly hostile external environment. Chair, I would submit this proposal has been considered by council officers. It's been considered at design stage, considered by the task group, by overview and scrutiny, by the cabinet and this council, and discounted. Railroading it through council by a motion like this makes a mockery of that entire process and should be rejected for that reason and that reason alone. Chair, I would urge this council to reject the motion. It is a worthy but misguided one. It does not deliver the efficiencies it says it will. It is fiscally utterly unsustainable. And I believe, Chair, that it should be rejected.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor wanted to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I may be a bit scatterbrained here because I wasn't planning on saying anything, but there were a couple of points that I just feel I need to address. As Councillor Strachan just said, and as the chair of the task group pointed out, the New Leisure, I was a member of the New Leisure Centre task group. My recollection of this particular meeting is there were 4 members there because 2 had failed to attend. And I, along with Councillor Ray, had concerns about taking out the fully electric heat pump system. My recollection was that we were in broad support of the value engineering savings that had been given, but in particular reference to this point, we did want some detail of income and savings before we made a full recommendation. I don't have the minutes with me. As I say, I wasn't planning on saying anything, but the minutes were read to me earlier last week, and that is what they say. We had broad support, but that we wanted more details on the savings and costs of this change. Those details didn't turn up until last week in response to Councillor Ray's motion, and therefore to say that the task group supported the change to hybrid is, in my opinion, incorrect. Councillor Strachan also mentioned a figure of about 52% generated by renewals. I happen to have, sorry? Oh, see, okay. I happen to have as a bookmark on my PC at home a website that gives you details of how much is generated by renewals at any point in time. At several points over the last couple of weeks, we achieved the new high of 78% of our electricity power by renewable energy. And that's only going to increase over the next 4, 5, 10 years. Thank you.
And Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I speak in support of the motion, obviously, and in many ways, I would say this is an important motion for this council as a test of this council's strength of resolve. Councillor Ray has already quoted from the climate emergency motion. Exactly 5 years ago today, that motion was passed, and he's also quoted from the Lichfield District 2050 strategy. That strategy, that vision, has a very ambitious comment in this area. It says under greener communities, will create the greenest district in the country by 2050. And that is a very ambitious aim, but I think absolutely right. I'd make 3 very brief points with your leave, Chair. Firstly, these need to be more than just words. Those, the motion and the Lichfield 2050 strategy, whenever this council gets the opportunity to put those principles into action, in my view, it should act. I completely understand the points that have been made. The climate emergency resolution didn't mean you always have to adopt the most environmentally friendly option on offer. But my point would be, if you have in front of you a choice, and it's trite to say politics and local politics is all about choices. If you have a choice that you have control over and you can act in a way consistent with the climate emergency, then of course you should. The second point I'd make, Chair, is that this is a council project and a council asset. And so really it's to echo what Councillor Ray was saying about, unlike many things in the district which are not in our control, we can advise, we can cajole, but they're not actually down to us. Here is something in front of us which we can control and we can have an impact on, and we have a tangible choice we can make, which will improve this council's carbon emissions. And then my third point would be on the financials. We've heard a number of speakers talk about that, and I fully understand the points that they're making. Even if we were to accept, and for the moment I wouldn't say it's accepted, but even if we were to accept this doesn't make as much financial sense to go with this motion, as we are on the road to 2050, and this is a spoiler alert for everybody, I suppose, there will be a number of times on this road to 2050 that we will have to make a choice like this on the financials, and it will arguably make financial sense to go the less environmentally friendly option. And to take up another point that was made, there will always be the argument, well, we could spend that money elsewhere in the district. There are other projects we could spend it on. Of course, that's the case. But when you have a clear choice like this to act in consistently with that vision that we've only just approved on 2050, I mean, I would ask the question, how on earth will this council meet that ambitious goal in the 2050 strategy if faced with a choice like this, it chooses not to act in the most environmentally friendly way? Chair, just finally, if I may, to pick up on the governance point that's been mentioned by a couple of speakers, and I think particularly Councillor Strachan was talking about this as his third point. I'm not sure, and I hope he knows I hold him in very high regard. I'm not sure language of breaking ranks and railroading is particularly helpful on this kind of motion. I'm happy for him to point me to the part of the Constitution that says you may not bring a motion if a topic has already been looked at by a task group, or that if somebody is in the dissenting or in the minority at a task group, although take Councillor Taylor's point about that, they may not then move a motion. I would suggest it isn't there, and in fact it's really important that any councillor in this chamber is able to bring a motion on a topic of such importance. And I think looking at all the speakers this evening, it's absolutely justified that it was an important topic to bring a motion on. So that would be my comment on governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Shall we ask now Councillor Ray to sum up? I don't see any other hands.
Thank you. Thank you. So I will first just address some of the points that have been made. Firstly, to Councillor Mears, I guess the point I'd be saying is that we need to be aiming for the highest standards when it comes to the facilities that we build and we manage in this district, which is consistent with the 2050 strategy. Councillor Smith, with the numbers, when I spoke, I mentioned 338. That was the amount of the budget, but I didn't hide the fact that the total cost is £545,000 for converting. But the point is, it's for this is a change for a generation, and it's also it's a responsible decision because electricity will be a less volatile, powered by renewables, is going to be a less volatile form of energy source for the future of this country and the future of our facility at the Leisure Centre. And something that you didn't really highlight, Councillor Smith, is that the all electric provides £68,000 of less cost in running that facility on an annual basis. And the Councillor Lung about the task group, and Councillor Strachan, we're sort of touching on the governance. I don't think what you said is quite right, because what happened was we had a report, we had a meeting in August we then had a report, and it was the report that said, brought forward these additional costs of reverting. There was no further meeting following that. And that's my point. And also following that, it didn't go to review and scrutiny, and it didn't come to full council. So this has been the first point to have a proper discussion about this point. There was email exchanges, as Councillor Long referred to, but there was not a proper task group scrutiny decision. And as Councillor Taylor said, there were reservations raised at the August meeting, which was the last meeting the time the task group met. And also picking up on a point that Councillor Strachan saying, you were talking about the technology and is it the most efficient technology? Just reminding everybody, when we first commissioned this leisure centre, the design, the spec was all electric. That's what we were advised, and that's what we were going to buy, and what we were going to build. So I'm not saying we're going into a space which we never were before. We're going to back what was the original vision for this leisure centre. So in summary, I've never denied we're talking about a serious amount of money, but what we are talking about is a long-term decision and a facility that's going to last for the next generation of this council. And if we make the right decision, we can make a serious and a responsible decision and submit and make a real change and a real impact, and a decision that will be supported by our residents, because we know the environmental considerations are high up on their agenda. We have a choice, councillors, and I ask you to vote for the motion.
Thank you very much. And we now also need to decide whether it's a named vote or whether there's any procedure, which I understand it is if the leader of the principal opposition party agrees, or if a majority of the council agrees. Yeah. There's a proposal being made, I think, is that seconded, that it be moved to a named vote? Yes. So all those in favour of a named vote? I don't think the principal, you're not agreeing to a named vote. No, Councillor Woodward is not calling for. All those against a named vote? Yeah, no, okay. So right, that motion falls then, but then we move to the motion. All those in favour of Councillor Ray's motion? Yeah, I'm in favour. Yeah. All those against? Abstentions? Three, thank Councillor Mears.
Three abstentions.
Shall I say?
So
Okay, I'll say that. So there were 12 votes in favour, 25 against, and 3 abstentions. Okay. Right, well, moving on. We now have a motion submitted by Councillor Marshall. Remember, it's 8:20. Just saying.
Chair, thank you. Chair, I welcome your subtle comment in terms of the time. In fact, I was going to say that I shall keep this relatively short in view of the fact that time is marching on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, I welcome this opportunity to highlight the potential plight of British farmers because of the budget bombshell which was dropped on the 30th of October by the government. to the proposed changes to agricultural property relief and inheritance tax. Now, it's something of a surprise to me that the government seems to have got its sums wrong. Now, that's not just my subjective assessment. It's also backed up by the Central Association for the Agricultural Valuers, and they're the real experts in this field. And they said in a simple quote, the government hasn't got its facts right. Also, the National Farmers Union have said that at least 75% of all commercial farms will fall above the government's threshold. Now, that's very, very much in contrast to the number which is being projected by the government itself. I find that quite surprising. And one of the reasons I find it very surprising is because the Chancellor's husband is actually Nicholas Joycey. Nicholas Joycey may not be a familiar name to you, but he's a very senior officer at the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA. Now, if any department has got full data on farmers' economic positions, then I would have thought DEFRA would be in a position to have that. So how it can be that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, brings out her swinging budget in terms of crippling family farms, and yet her husband has all the data, courtesy of DEFRA, I really don't understand how we've got this dissonance in the finances. Now, we live in a fairly rural community. I think Lichfield district is recognised as rural in general terms. I know many family farms. I was brought up in a farming family myself, and the effect of this legislation could be catastrophic. We've talked about a climate catastrophe. This is a farming catastrophe. And I know that we often talk about the fact the threshold is £1 million, and that, of course, is a huge amount of money. But if I told you that £1 million today would not buy you a 100-acre farm, not if it was with a house and buildings. That's just for the farmland itself. So when the government sets a threshold of £1 million, it is very, very low. And I guarantee that the majority of farms in the Lichfield district would fall prey to this very, very damaging legislation. And for that reason, I'd like to think that we as a council, as a local authority, can send a message to the farming community and to the rural community in general that we are supportive of their cause, the fact that many of them work 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Many of them, I can guarantee, don't get regular holidays. I know many of us like our holidays abroad, holidays in this country. Many, many farmers don't get the opportunity to have those holidays, especially if they are sole operators, just perhaps a 60-year-old dairy farmer hasn't got anyone to help him. He probably never has a proper holiday at all. But they work assiduously 365 days a year just so that we can put food on the table. In terms of food security, I think the government's plans certainly jeopardize food security in this country. And I think that's very, very dangerous and very worrying. And I think that's another reason why we need to be much more supportive of the family farms. So, as I say, I welcome this opportunity to address your members. Thank you for that. And I look forward to any questions or points being made. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I say, do we have a seconder for that motion before? Okay.
Motion and reserve my rights to speak.
Okay. Right, then I've got, yeah, I think there's going to be some
Chair,
amendment.
yes, we've got an amended version of this motion, and obviously Councillor Marshall and myself have been in contact. But and members have probably got a copy of this in front of them. No. But yeah, so members got the wording of the revised. No, I'm going to amend it. Yes, that's right. Yeah. So, so if I could just speak to our amendment, our amended motion.
Yeah, if you can, yes, if you can explain.
Yeah, so
critical
firstly,
bits of
the
it.
first point I was going to say is that as a group, we have great support for the rural community and for the farming community. So we do share the sentiment behind this. But as I've been quite straight with Councillor Marshall, some of the language of his motion is a motive. It's too political for what we can support, and also it puts forward measures that this council just cannot deliver on. So the amended version of the motion is in front of you, but
I don't really understand what it is.
this is
What's the difference?
No, it's not. Doesn't have the.
Right.
Oh, does it?
Okay.
yeah.
So that's
but
me,
there are
yeah, and I've no idea.
so what's I think this got rushed out, this amended this amendment amended version, but there are some other amendments which we need to have made.
Yeah, go on, go on, what's your point? Yeah, we're trying to find out precisely what they are.
Well, I can't see why that version with the changes couldn't have been circulated rather than the paper that got in front of you.
Yeah,
Well-
Councillor Woodward, I have some sympathy there, and I did want it circulated earlier, but that hasn't happened. But so I've just explained why we're not comfortable with what Councillor Marshall's put forward, but we do understand the sentiment. But could I just talk you through? There are still some further amendments in this amended wording, which didn't reflect the conversations we've had with Councillor Marshall. I think it's got rushed out. But so the first one is.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Do you want to just read us, perhaps if you just point out the very specific
yes, so
words.
if you go down to the first one, in the third line down, it says which
Scrap.
in the original motion it said which would scrap agricultural property relief. That's not right. It's not been scrapped. It's been reduced. So that is in the amended version.
Right.
And then we go down to a section which is headed rural community stability.
Yeah.
Now that should read the proposed tax change. At the moment it says the proposed tax reduction.
Right.
Yes, risks destabilizing communities. We're not comfortable with that sort of a language. That's too emotive. We understand the concerns, but to say we're talking destabilizing communities is something we can't support. And then, and can I just finish, please? I've just got one more point.
I don't see why they can't amend the motion.
Yes.
Well, he's.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find a point. And then when it comes to the resolution, the council resolves the first resolution opposing changes to Inheritance Act. Again, that's an ultra vires point that this council can't oppose, national legislation. So with the amended version you've got, I shall talk through where we've amended it, but there are some further amendments which we need, which don't reflect the conversations we've had with council.
So you think there's further amendments we don't have written down? I don't.
Well, yes, I just talked you through those. Did that?